Hey, what's up guys? Tyler here with Secure Team. Now, the other day, if you remember, I posted a video that was a response to a claim put forth by Joe Rogan on his podcast, wherein which he stated that essentially there is no hard proof or evidence of the UFO and alien phenomena. And so if you saw that video, you'll know that I went on to put forth a summary of evidence that would directly refute the claim that there is no proof. On the contrary, there is a ton of proof. And so even today, the skeptics and maybe those who are new to the topic, many of them are still iffy as to whether the burden of proof has been met. You know, we all talk about things like the Roswell crash, and a lot of this stuff, of course, has happened 50 plus years ago. And so people will ask me, Tyler, are things like the Roswell crash the only hard evidence that you can put forth that this phenomena exists, that there are unknown and secretive projects, craft, that both come from space and are created by the government using reverse-engineered alien technology? Do the Men in Black truly exist? Can we see some evidence that would once and for all prove that these visitations and crashes have actually occurred? And can you do it by presenting a little bit more evidence than that of something that occurred 50, 60 plus years ago? And so today, I am going to prove to you that everything I just spoke about is not only real, but has continued to happen throughout the years. Now, many of you may not know this, but back in 2008, a UFO crashed near Needles, California, with residents in the tri-state area of Nevada, Arizona, and California claiming to have seen the object blazing through the sky and crashing on the banks of the Colorado River. Witness reports said that the UFO had a bluish or green hue to it, and that 17 minutes after the crash, military personnel in huge black helicopters showed up in the area and cordoned off the crash site. The local people in the area claim that the crashed object was later lifted away by two huge black helicopters. And well, I could continue giving you a summary of what happened that year, but I think it best to simply let you guys kick back and watch the investigation that was done by the local CBS News team, who provided ongoing coverage of this UFO crash and produced a series of videos about the incident and the strange men in black that showed up in the area after the object crashed. So let's take a look, and we'll talk more in just a minute.
A large object with a turquoise hue plummeted out of the sky earlier this summer and plowed into the earth south of Las Vegas, somewhere near Needles, California.
Yeah, eyewitnesses say this was no meteorite, especially since a bunch of helicopters came looking for it and then hauled it away. I-Team Chief Investigator George Knapp has been talking to the people who saw this thing, and he's here now with the story.
Got a fun little mystery on our hands here. The object was seen in the early morning hours of May 14th. It appeared to crash into the ground just west of the Colorado River. And that's when things got interesting for residents of that area. Somewhere in this rough terrain, just west of the Colorado River and south of Needles, is a point of impact, maybe some burn marks, created by something that fell from the sky. Frank Costigan saw it because he got up at 3 in the morning to let his cat out. A fiery object that flashed across the sky, but it wasn't a meteor, he says.
Up in the sky, it's just bright. It was bright enough that it illuminated the ground.
For 7 years, Costigan worked as the chief of airport security at LAX. He says the mystery object flew out of the northeast heading southwest, traveling very fast, but at one point it slowed down, then sped up again.
And it went behind a hill, and I waited to see if I could hear it crash, because as big as it was bound to make noise.
But he didn't hear a crash.
I was coming into work.
Hours later, David Hayes, the owner of K-Talks Radio in Needles, was coming to work when he spotted an odd formation of dark vehicles driving off the highway. He drew a picture of the lead vehicle, a large truck with a dome on top and a black structure that reminded him of a stealth fighter.
It seemed like it was some kind of surveillance vehicle, but four-wheel drive, and it had government plates, the U.S. government plates on it. And behind it was a couple of vans that were they look like support vehicles.
The men inside had military bearings, Hayes said, but weren't in uniform. He made eye contact with one of the drivers, and the guy followed him. Later in the day, one of the vehicles was parked outside his station, seemingly conducting a surveillance of the place.
You see these guys, and they're staring you down. It's sort of a Men in Black sort of a feel to it?
Absolutely. Very serious, serious as a heart attack.
I went up to the airport.
Coincidentally, Costigan, the ex-cop, works on investigations for Hayes. When he came into the radio station, he told Hayes about the thing he'd seen in the sky, and Hayes told him about the Men in Black. Then they got another piece of the puzzle, a call from a man who lives in a houseboat on the river, who said he saw the fiery object, that it had crashed about 100 yards west of the river, that it landed with a thump. Hayes says he's known the witness for years by the name Bob on the River. Bob thought a plane had crashed and tried to call 911, but his cell wouldn't work, so he moved his boat out into the river and then heard the helicopters. In an interview with journalist Linda Howe, Bob says he saw at least 5 helicopters flying in formation, including a large sky crane. The crane picked up the oval-shaped object, still glowing, and flew away, heading in the direction of Las Vegas. One odd detail, the choppers arrived only 17 minutes after the object crashed. Bob described it to Hayes.
About the size of he said it was like the size of a semi-trailer, about like a oblong-shaped thing, and like a tank, something like that.
There's got to be something, some evidence on the ground.
Out of the blue, the people at the station got a call from a friend in Laughlin who said the Laughlin airport had been inundated on the night of the crash with so-called Janet planes. That's the airline that flies workers to top-secret Area 51. Costigan says the airport could not confirm this because no one's on duty after 6 p.m. at night, not even in the tower. The black vehicles have left Needles. Bob, the houseboat guy, can't be found either.
The fact that there were people here the next day, almost like a team, it seemed like, that they were doing either some sort of cleanup or whatever. The point is that something definitely happened.
We phoned nearly every agency we could think of to see if they had received any report or knew anything, and not surprisingly, none of them seem to know anything. They're aware of it, they just don't have any specific information. Here's the list of those we called. Police agencies in 3 states. We called the Laughlin Airport, the National Weather Service, the FAA, several military bases, including Nellis. A military watchdog group found a public record showing there was at least 1 Army helicopter in that area at the time. That helicopter, oddly enough, is listed as being attached to a U.S. base in Europe. So, the question is, what the heck's it doing here? We're following Freedom of Information requests, and we're going to report back when we get some responses. We have some links on our website where you can learn more about this case, plus an oldie but goodie, a video report we aired about 8 years ago about another weird crash here in Nevada. We're just getting started on this thing. We've got some good links. I think we're going to get some answers on this thing, and we'll come back with more. Yeah. This fisherman was on a slow drift down the Colorado River south of the town of Needles when the large glowing cylinder plunged out of the sky.
It didn't look like a meteor. I've seen meteors before. It looked like a plane crashing.
The witness, who prefers to be known as Bob on the River, says the object slammed into the riverbank 50 or more yards west of his houseboat.
It hit and it thumped. It didn't crash, it didn't explode. It went poof, a thump.
In this desolate stretch of the river, much of the surrounding land is sandy, like a beach, so a thump on impact rings true. Because the river is lower than the bank, houseboat Bob could not see the crash itself, but he had no trouble eyeballing the military-type helicopters that swooped in just moments later.
I believe there were 4 of them. One kept its light on me, one kept its light on the front of my boat, two of the other ones were circling.
The smaller choppers were joined by a huge sky crane, similar to this one, which somehow attached itself to the crashed object, then hauled it away in formation toward the north. Minutes later, in Bullhead City, Brad Allen saw the aerial procession.
I looked through the binoculars, and below one of them was a green object. It wasn't glowing, it was just faint green.
There's so many possibilities of what it was, but
the story of the UFO crash and the mystery helicopters first emerged on K-Talk's radio in Needles after Bob on the river called in, a decision he came to regret. When the story went national, Bob was nowhere to be found. In the months since, the I-Team filed records requests with more than a dozen federal, state, and local agencies. Not one knows anything about the incident, although 2 federal intelligence agencies stated they have no records they can release. The FAA told us it does not retain records of what might have been in the air over the river, but the I-Team obtained a single transponder reading from the morning of May 14th, confirming the presence of at least one military chopper. We also found a detachment of the Special Ops Group known as the Night Stalkers at the Henderson Airport during the same time frame. But it isn't the helicopters that have spooked Bob and other residents of the area. Rather, it's the X-Men.
There's been some strange people in town.
Needles radio station employee Paul Fick saw the mystery men and their blacked-out vehicles starting the morning after the UFO crash.
But there was a truck parked down here at the end of the street, pretty much pointed at the tower behind the station. And it was one of the four-wheel drive trucks with the shell on the back that had like the bumps, radar domes, things like that. And same thing Dave saw, one of the guys, the guys that are sitting there with the sunglasses on, very stiff looking.
Phone call came in from River Bob. That,
political organizer Tony Fagan had a face-to-face with the mystery men. The day after Bob called the radio station, Fagan was grilled by a stranger who showed up at one of her political meetings.
This gentleman came over and shook hands. He said that his name was Phil, and that he understood that I was at the radio show when all of the calls were coming in about River Bob. And did I know what had hit the water? Did I know how big it was? Did I know what color it was? And he got very frustrated when I said that I really wasn't paying attention. That
the visitor had told Tony he wanted to join the party, but after the meeting, quizzed her again about the UFO.
This guy was very crisp, kind of a military-like haircut, way too clean cut, just way too clean cut for our group.
I mean, what are the factors that make you think that?
I've spent more time on the land, in the area of what I believe to be the crash site, in my own time with my own four-wheel drive, doing my own efforts out there. But keep in mind, this wasn't reported for 5 months after the situation occurred. And after that, now it's been a year. I honestly, and in my heart of hearts, believe that that site was cleaned up immediately after the crash took place.
Because it looks too clean.
It looks too clean. Thank you. I couldn't say it any better myself. It's when you're used to the river and you know that part of the river and that part of the landscape on both sides, whether it's Arizona side, California side, either way.
After having watched all of that, and an amazing job done by Chief Investigative Reporter George Knapp and photojournalist Matt Adams, this is definitive evidence that in 2008, an unidentified object that looked nothing like any man-made craft we have ever seen crashed on the banks of the Colorado River, after which just 17 minutes later, a squadron of military helicopters and men in black flooded the city, where for months after, witnesses to the crash disappeared and were harassed by men in black who were obviously there to tie up loose ends. And so the big question is, what was this object, again, that had a bluish-green hue to it? Was it something man-made, or was it something from off-planet? I think one thing we can say is that for the military to show up just minutes after the crash, they were obviously tracking this object, and were determined to not only hide and cover up as quickly as possible evidence of the crash, but to also threaten locals who may have seen it and ensure that no one knew too much about this incident. So with that, thank you guys for stopping by today. If any of you were in this area in 2008 and saw something strange or have more info, please let us know down in the comments and stay tuned because I've got a lot more coming, and I will see you all back in just a bit.